Okay, Manny. Thank you for letting me observe you and for participating in this with me. I really appreciate it. So I want to get right down to it. Before the lesson, we agreed upon the idea that we were going to look at the idea of using multiple intelligences in the lesson. And your lesson was about, your objective was to find all the different ways that you can make 1/2 using smaller fractional pieces. And I just want to ask you, what were your impressions of the lesson?
Well, you know, it was my first time using fraction blocks with beginning fraction users at that point.
Okay.
Haven't taught 3rd grade before and haven't used that method with them. And I was actually really pleased with how comprehensible I thought made the concept to the majority of students in the room. I think that the numbers on a fraction can be somewhat confusing and disorienting when you're dealing with them for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, the students had the objects in front of them. Everyone has experience at some point in their lives with taking a whole of something and chopping it into smaller pieces. When they could see that right in front of them, it became really easy to see that, for example, okay, 3 parts of 6 is the same as 1 part out of 2, because you can fit them together. They're the same.
Sure, excellent. So during that lesson, having used the fraction blocks in addition to just the numbers on the board like you did, how did you know that the students were learning and that they understood your objective?
Well, as I walked around the room, I could see them making the shapes. So if they had 3 greens and they made it into the same as a 1 red half piece, I could tell that they understood that. After that, when I was calling on students, I would ask them to tell me. For example, if they said, I used 3 green pieces to make 1 half, 1 red, I'd ask them, okay, how many green pieces make a whole? They'd tell me 6. How many did you use? 3. So how would we write that as a fraction? I tried to use the vocabulary numerator denominator and tried to see if they could understand how to write it as a fraction.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them were able to do it. Sometimes I needed to give them a little prodding. Wasn't always instantly automatic for everybody, but for the most part, I could gauge their understanding just by asking that question to them.
Mm-hmm. So when you say that you needed to give some of the students a little bit of prodding,
Yeah.
I assume what you're talking about is as you're walking around the room and they're showing you how they make 1/2 with the fraction blocks.
Yeah.
I assume what you're saying is you needed to prod them a little bit in terms of how to get them to show you as an actual fraction operation on the board. For
Right.
example, 1/4 plus 1/4 equals 1/2. That's what you needed to prod them to do. So how did you use multiple intelligences in your lesson to be able to get them from point A to point B?
Well, I tried to start out with the concrete. So you had a manipulative visual thing you could begin with to start. I think that...
Which were the blocks?
Which were the blocks.
Yeah.
So everyone started by doing that. They used that. That lets you use your hands. You could tell probably there were some students in there who really need to hold on to something, move something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that worked out well for them. They could also see exactly what they were doing. And then taking from that, I tried to move it to the more abstract level of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So using the visual intelligence, kinesthetic intelligence, and...
So the way I saw you do it was you had the children play with the blocks,
Yeah.
and then you had them say, for example, oh, the blue one, which I think was 1/4,
Right.
and the blue one, they make 1/2. And then you went to the board and you would say, okay, well, the blue one is 1/4 and the other blue one is 1/4, and you showed how they would make 1/2 together.
Yeah.
You also noted that some of the students needed to play.
Yeah.
And so I picked out one student, Lily,
Yeah.
who definitely needs to play.
She does.
Right? So there was a moment where you were asking the students in the middle portion of the lesson to do just what we talked about, to transfer their knowledge of what the block pieces were. For example, 2 blues make 1/2, 3 greens make 1/2,
Yeah.
to the number.
Yeah.
So 1/4 and 1/4, or 1/6, 1/6, 1/6.
Yeah.
Lily had a lot of trouble doing that.
Sure.
And when you asked her, she couldn't quite put it together yet. She
Yeah.
could put it together with her hands, but not quite on the board. Besides just asking her verbally,
Yeah.
how could you have helped her to demonstrate that she knew, using the idea of multiple intelligences, what you were asking, so that it would have appealed to her intelligence a little bit more?
Perhaps I could have asked her to hold up a number of blocks that she used, for instance. So I tell her, okay, how many? Okay, what else did you use to make 1/2? She'd say 3 greens. Okay, can you hold up the 3 greens you used for me? Show me what you made. She could hold those up. What else did you use? If she said two browns, those are the fourths.
Okay, the browns are the fourths. Sorry.
Yeah, hold those up for me. And then, once she has those in her hand, she was holding the 2 browns, for instance, then I could ask her, okay, then I could start asking her, I think she needs it a little bit step by step. So I say, okay, how many of those browns make a whole piece? She's usually able to answer those questions well, so she'd tell me 4. How many are you holding right now? 2. So how do we write that as a fraction? I might scaffold it step by step there, have her hold the pieces, so she at least has a little more chance to touch the pieces, hold them, use them, show me when she's answering the question.
I totally agree with that approach. I think with a student like Lily, who's heavily kinesthetic like that, she needs a little bit more of a step-by-step approach to get to the abstract, and I think that would work really well next time. I wanted to talk about Angeline. Ali's sister's name is
Angelina.
Angelina. Okay.
Yeah.
So Angelina, she's also a student that seems to need to play a little bit more.
Yeah.
One of the things that I liked that you did with a lot of the students was that you asked them to show me what you were thinking. Angelina had a lot of trouble. It was clear that she knew, but she had a lot of trouble putting it into words.
Yeah.
I also noticed, though, that Angelina liked the drawing part, the last part of the lesson. How could you have used, let's say, the visual spatial intelligence to help Angelina to demonstrate to you that she knew, other than just writing the fractions on the board?
Well, maybe I could have had more time to have all the students draw some kind of a fraction. They made either a circle, divide that into pieces. Since she seemed to be engaged by that part, that could have helped her, and I think everyone would have benefited from it. That could be a possible approach.
Do you think that, I agree with you, do you think that in the middle of the lesson, where you were asking them to go directly from their knowledge of what the pieces were to what their fractional number representations are, do you think you could have used a similar approach up on the board? What could you have done?
Let's see. Yeah, that could have been helpful. At that point, it's true, I was just asking them to put that into a number, take from the pieces, but I wasn't drawing anything on the board.
So how could you have used the visual spatial intelligence on the board to help appeal to those?
Well, I could have just used a circle at that point. Could have used a circle, split that in half, or split it into 4 parts, or 6. It's however we're doing it, and shaded those in as she's answering the question, so she can see those both. So if I'm telling her, okay, you use 2 brown blocks, 2/4, or 2 brown blocks to make a half, and I'm trying to ask her, how would you say that as a fraction? Maybe it would be helpful to make the circle again on the board, split that into 4 pieces, ask her again how many you're going to shade in, go through kind of the step-by-step way, the way we were talking about with Lily. Yeah,
I think so. And I think a lot of what we've gone over so far kind of gives us opportunity to use more of, well, you use the bodily kinesthetic very well with the fraction blocks. I think we can maybe use more robust examples of the visual spatial intelligence by putting charts and diagrams on the board just as you're talking about, and using that also to help students to explain and demonstrate that they've learned to you. I want to talk for a minute about some of your learners that are more independent, because you have a lot of them in your classroom.
You do.
How could you have used the idea of multiple intelligences to push them even further along in that lesson, to kind of enhance their learning in that lesson?
Well, takes a bit of thought to think about that. What I would like them to be able to do, the ultimate goal of all of this, is to be able to identify equivalent fractions for anything. rather than just for one half. One half is kind of my starting point. I take off from, and yeah, like you're saying, there's definitely at least 5 of them in there who got that very quickly, and would probably be able to take it to the next step and find what's an equivalent for 2/3 or whatever. And the only thing I'm thinking at this point, maybe we can talk through a little more, but the only thing I'm thinking is just to try to work in some slightly more open-ended time that, say, if you figured that out once you got that, try to make other possible variations and other possible with the blocks.
Your thinking is right on. For more independent learners, simple goal setting, you know where you're going with your lesson, right?
Yeah.
You know what you want them to be able to do in the end. You want them to be able to identify and move back and forth between all equivalent fractions. You know what that goal is. Setting that goal for your more independent learners is a way to appeal to their intelligence style. In a similar way, some of your learners that like to work in pairs, but may not be as independently oriented, or may just need a little bit more support in learning the lesson, you can give them pairs and goals in pairs to be able to kind of push them forward and push them towards a future goal if you see that they're kind of acquiring the material very quickly. But your thinking is exactly right. So that line of thought, follow that, and if you do that, you'll be able to really effectively reach almost every type of learner in your class. So, in the end, how did you feel about how you used multiple intelligences during the lesson? Where did you feel that you used them very well, and where do you feel that you could incorporate even more next time?
Well, I feel like it's definitely a start. It's a good overall framework, I think, for teaching an introductory fractions lesson. And I think that the use of the fraction blocks was the key piece. I think that's what made it comprehensible to the greatest number of students. So I'm happy with that part, that visual, spatial, kinesthetic aspect. The same thing, basically what we talked about. I could have, for next time, I could work in a little bit more opportunities for the people like Angelina or Lily to be able to hold up their blocks, go step by step a little more than they were.
Sure.
You might need just a few more scaffolds. For the really independent learners, a little bit more opportunities for open-ended experimentation to find out different combinations for making equivalent fractions.
Accompanied by specific goals.
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, I totally agree. I think you used them very well. I think in one lesson you were able to hit your kinesthetic learners, your visual learners, your logical mathematical learners, obviously, in that you put in the end you put the fractions up on the board, and in the end you made them write out their equations. So you hit a lot of different learning styles in this lesson, and I think kind of the path that you were talking about for how to incorporate more next time, they're small behaviors, but they can make a big difference in terms of really reaching every critical learner style. So, good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.